So the claim I'm responding to is that conventional food is just as healthy as organic food. My opponent's secondary claims were that organic food still contains pesticides. Number two, that there are no long-term effects of the consumption of pesticides, and that healthy options come from healthy eating. So my response for secondary claim one, organic food contains pesticides. So my opponent, or the advocate, made the assertion that organic pesticides are used more intensely than synthetic, referring to the National Center for Food and Agriculture Policy study in 1971. The organic fungicides are used at a rate of 34 pounds per acre compared to 1.6 of synthetic. The numbers are, my response is that the numbers are too old, that the microsprayer technology that has been implemented in the 1990s just completely changes what the numbers are. The mixture of pesticides have changed since the 1970s, and the 34 to 1.6 ratio is completely invalid now. Also, my advocate makes the assumption that the organic pesticides and synthetic pesticides are equivalent, but provides no evidence for this and is basing their argument on the quantity and not exactly the toxicity of the pesticides. Organic pesticides are also used in conventional food production. So organic regulations just limit substances, they don't actually change the substances. So whatever pesticides are used in organic farming, they're just used in conventional farming as well, or they can be used in conventional farming as well. One counterclaim I would say is that the advocate cites USA Regulations Part 205 Subpart G, saying that it allows 20 plus synthetic pesticides to be used in organic food. But Subpart G is also 16 pages long, and synthetic substances is only 1 page. So there are actually so many other different substances that aren't actually synthetic. And so there's just one small piece of an arsenal that they can use. Response to claim 2, there are no long-term effects on the consumption of pesticides. My advocate offers no evidence that the pesticides aren't harmful. Also, that the advocate contradicts themselves by asserting that pesticides aren't harmful because it implies their first point doesn't matter as much. If pesticides aren't harmful, then it doesn't matter that they're used at a rate of 34 to 1. On July 2007, no, counterclaim would be July 2007 study conducted by the California Department of Health Services and the UC Berkeley School of Public Health found a 6-fold increase in the risk factor for autism spectrum disorders for children of women exposed to organochlorine pesticides, the type regularly used in conventional crop production, but not organic crop production. And my response to claim 3, that healthy options come from healthy eating. The advocate claims that local food is safe, but provides no evidence. Because of the weaker regulation of local food compared to organic food, there isn't much to suggest that the locally grown food is actually grown like organic food. At least there are no checks for it. Also, the advocate asserts that the consuming of high amounts of organic food can be as unhealthy as conventional counterpart. Like they use the example of chocolates among other foods. But this can be more attributed to the food itself and not actually the method of production. Another counterclaim would be in California, September 2, 2013. In San Francisco, it was reported that there was a surprise inspection by the State Department of Pesticide Regulation on the Bay Area grocery stores. Nearly 40% of conventionally grown vegetables like tomatoes were found to have high trace amounts of pesticides, and organic foods not so much. And thank you.
All right, Pablo, organizationally things are pretty easy to follow. On the first point, you actually label the secondary claims numerically, so it's pretty straightforward, and I can see what the claims are that you're advancing. You didn't really have a source on the argument about how there was a different kind of diffuser, sprayer, application process in the 1990s. I assume that it's probably true, but you ought to provide a demonstration of that. On the second argument, you kind of explain what the issue is. You're not sure that there's a demonstration that pesticides are harmful or not harmful. You basically come back with a reaction later on that talks about them being harmful as a way to respond to that issue. And then the third point is attempt to diminish the argument by just suggesting it's a single page out of lots of pages of things that could be applied. Yeah, but if it's a single page, it makes them equally dangerous because the pesticides is the only thing that people are talking about. The synthetic pesticides, the only things that people are talking about. I'm not exactly sure that that does quite as much as you think it's accomplishing there on that point. On the second point, again, there's good clear labeling there. Your argument is that they don't provide evidence that they are not harmful. There's confusion in the way this argument is developed, and I think you need to kind of explain your way out of that issue. Part of that is the nature of the advocate's argument itself, and part of it is the way that it kind of puts you in a situation where you're having to advance something that you wouldn't think you'd have to provide proof for. But you did provide a nice piece of evidence there that suggests that the presence of pesticides has been linked to some particular harm. So that would suggest that those foods that didn't have pesticides on them would have a lower risk of at least that particular harm. On the third point, you challenged the presence of evidence or the absence of evidence there. I thought you had a good argument at the end when you showed in that inspection in San Francisco how much of the produce that people consume does have significant trace amounts of the pesticides and therefore would render it more dangerous. That's what you need to do at the conclusion, is summarize what your argument is and just come back and say, so the differences that they demonstrate are not all that important. The truth of the matter is that pesticides do have dangers, and that those dangers exist at the level of the consumer, and there's plenty of reason to be worried about consuming those kinds of things. That's a better exit then, and that's it. All right, thank you.